Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This is the first time that I'm speaking since marrying that beautiful lady in the second row over there, Joe. And whenever I wake up in the morning to see her, there's always this one thought that comes to me, and even actually when I look at her right now, it's, wow, she's such a beautiful girl. and she's very, very sweet too. Very patient with me, very forgiving, very funny. And she does this thing really well. She knows how to imitate people, like make an impression of people. So if you get to know her well, she'll be able to make a really, really good impression. Anyway, and just the relationship that we have, and we've been married for a little over 5 months now, but it's the really nice thing about it is that it's just helping me to see what God's love is like, at least in a different facet of it, a new way to see how God's love is like for us. So, for example, here I have me and Jelly, we're these two completely different spirits, these two completely different people, and I cannot control her in the same way that God cannot control us into loving Him. We're that independent of each other. But as we learn to live with each other and in a way that just is not a compromise, but also a way that brings out the best in both. It's just a reflection of our relationship with God. Because as we get to know God more, we'll actually discover ourselves even more than if we were to just say, okay, as I get to know you, God, I'm going to be half me, half you. It's not half-half, it's completely God coming in completely 100%.
Yes.
And then as that happens, we're going to get to know ourselves, our uniqueness, our own identity, 100%, even more. So, marriage, in this sense, is helping me, is teaching me how to live this life more fully. And I would imagine everyone here, or not everyone, but a lot of people here are also parents. And I could just foresee that in the future that relationship will also bring that out more fully. The main thing that I want to share with everyone today is in John 10:10, Jesus tells us that He comes here to bring us life more abundantly. You don't have to bring that up, but we know the verse, we've heard it, that Jesus has come to give us life and give it more fully. And I wanted to share this thought in conjunction with I guess a lot of the natural worldview, how people in the world often think of it. And people, as we hear, they often say that in whatever we do, we just have to make sure we do it in moderation. And just as long as we're not too extreme one way or too extreme the other way, as long as we just have some sort of nice balance, and that's good. We hear that, right?
Right.
But I came across this book. One hobby that I do recently is reading a lot of books, so I started collecting C.S. Lewis books, and by the time I read his autobiography, he listed off a bunch of books that influenced him, so I decided to read those as well. So there's this one book in particular, Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton, and he said something about it, about the Christian way of life, that's very different than how the rest of the world would think of it. The rest of the world thinks in everything we should do it in moderation. But Christianity says something different. Natural thinking says that virtue is some sort of balance, that we have to find the middle ground. But in Christianity, it declares it as a conflict. The collisions of two passions that are apparently opposite, but of course are not really inconsistent, but they were such that it was hard to hold both simultaneously. So what I'll do in this talk is to share this first 3 different virtues that we know of, and how the Christian worldview of it is is fundamentally different than how the rest of the world thinks of it. So let's first look at courage. And a lot of what I'm saying is paraphrase or maybe even verbatim what Chesterton said, but I did change some things to fit here more. So let's look at courage first. Courage is a contradiction in its meaning. It means, if we think about what courage is, it is the strong desire to live, yet taking the form of a readiness to die. And this is something that Jesus says, "He that will lose his life, the same shall save it. But if you will try to save your life, then you will lose it." He says this contradiction. But when we think about it in terms of courage, it's not some sort of theoretical thing. It's not some mystical thing that only heroes know the secret. It's actually a piece of everyday advice for sailors, for soldiers, for mountaineers. You might see it perhaps in a standard handbook for people who are soldiers or something like that. And the paradox of courage is this, and I'll describe it in this sense. Imagine a soldier who he's in the middle of a battlefield, and all his enemies are around him and closing in, right? So this soldier, if he were to be able to get out of it and live, he needs to be able to combine this strong sense of wanting to live with a strange carelessness about dying. On the other hand, so pretend this soldier only wants to really, really live, right? If he merely clings on to life, he might just stay there in his position, and they will get him, and he would be deemed a coward because he never took the risk of finding the way to escape. So he must not merely wait for death, because that would be a suicide, but he must seek life by risking his own life. Do we see the paradox here?
Yes.
Chesterton says it like this: he must seek his life in a spirit of furious indifference to it. He must desire life like water, yet drink death like wine. So knowing the worldly view of it, no one's really been able to express this riddle just in a clear way. But Christianity has done it more, and we can see through it, through its examples throughout history. There's just so many instances of that. There's martyrs from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they love life so much, but they also know that there's something better than themselves. It's not that they say, "Oh, I only love life halfway, and I'm just gonna, it's no big deal." But they really like it, but at the same time, they really love their faith. Something that's two really strong things, and by doing that, even death isn't as big of a deal anymore. And for that's why when we look at martyrs, it's just, we see so much, we have high reverence towards them. So we see this contradiction of passions everywhere in Christian thinking. If we even just look at the Sermon on the Mount, if we read it, which is Matthew 5, 6, and 7, we see contradiction or paradox after paradox, saying the courage example, if a man loses his life, he will gain it. If he tries to save it, then he will lose it. Or the meek, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, or love your enemies. All these paradoxes everywhere. Let's take, for instance, the matter of modesty. And with this one, we'll take it from the point of view of how the rational world, how a very natural way of seeing it, not the way the Christians see it. But modesty and pride, the two of them put together. So if we were to ask any reasonable average person, and they would call themselves, "I'm very content with who I am," right? Some people are better than me, some people are worse than me. But I'm satisfied with who I am. So they see themselves as some sort of middle ground. I'm confident in who I am, I like who I am, but at the same time, I don't want to hold my chin too high because, other people will think I'm proud. So can you see here, this particular worldview is kind of trying to find a balance. Okay, I want to be proud but not too proud, that kind of thing. But the thing about this is that this sort of pride, it never really gets us to be able to be really proud about something. At the same time, the modesty is, if we think about it, some sort of false modesty. It's not the sort of modesty that you get when you're a child, sitting on grass and looking at the stars and being at wonder. Being like, wow, there's just so much greater than who I am. But the Christian worldview of it can be found even in Genesis. So, if we go to Genesis, we see kind of this paradox also. When God created man, he created man in his image, right? So, from that time, when you say something is created in the image of God, or in the image of something else, you can imagine it as a statue. So imagine us. He created us as little statues of him. I mean, we're not God, but we're images of him. And when he created man as the peak of all creation. Out of every single thing that he created in the whole universe, the most wondrous creation is man. Or, for men, we would say woman. The most wondrous thing in creation is mankind. So, as a human being, from the way that it's described in Genesis, we can kind of see this paradox. And I'll describe it like this. Out of every single creature in the whole world, in the entire creation, mankind is the peak. And for that, we can be proud about it. Because we were made to subdue the earth. We were meant to take care of it. We were meant to be like a representation of God to the rest of the universe, to the rest of the world, to the rest of creation. So we can be proud about it. But at the same time, the way Christianity describes the status of man is that man is fallen and is broken. And there's this whole, we have this sense, and I feel like we could even just feel it, that we have this sense that we were made for so much more. And we're at the state where we're not that, and because of that, we can be humble. Because there's just, in order to get to understand, and in order to experience just all that wonder, we can't rely on ourselves. There's that level where we can't just try, and then suddenly we'll be perfect. It's God himself coming down. So it leaves us at this place where we can be proud in terms of the rest of creation, and that's complete. That's 100%. But at the same time, we can be 100% humble at who we are, because we're at a state where we're broken and we need fixing. And when I just think about this image, as I read this book, it was really a beautiful picture in my head that I don't have to just be this person that's, I'm confident, but I don't want to be too confident. It's not that. It's a completely different paradigm. That we could be completely proud of who we are. And even as each person, we can be proud of who we are because we are unique, and the way God created us is completely unique. So out of every creation, out of everyone in this room, I'm completely unique, and you're completely unique. And we can be very proud of who we are, but at the same time, we can be very humble because we are broken. There's no conflict there, even though it's a paradox. So I just thought that was a very beautiful image and I wanted to share it. And in one last case that I wanted to share is the case of charity, or in other words, unlimited love, unconditional love. So the way that charity works is that it asks us to do two things. Either to pardon an act that's unpardonable, or to love people who are unlovable. But if we look at this from the Christian worldview, we can see that it actually is possible. So if we were to ask any rational person, a normal person, about love and forgiving other people, they would probably say, you know, there's some things that you can forgive, but there's other things you really can't.
Yeah.
Like, if someone gives a small little lie, a white lie, then we could just laugh about it after